BraveMaker show is hosted by Tony Gapperstone. Thanks for tuning in. It's showtime.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Tony Gapperstone. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am an actor and a writer and a director and a filmmaker. And this is very informal of me today. I happen to be in a cafe for episode 197 because my day just super got away from me for really good reasons. I was getting my birthday present from my family, which was new ink. So I'm very excited about that. But I have a really special guest today for episode 197, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more with her about her film called The TUBA Thieves. That is ALISON O'Daniel. So let's welcome ALISON to the show. Hi, ALISON.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, very excited. Please introduce yourself. You want to do your pronouns or physical description, anything you want to do, go ahead. It's all you right now.
Great. My name's ALISON O'Daniel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white woman with brown bangs and brown curly hair, kind of long brown curly hair, and I have a haircut that specifically is cut around my ears so that I can show off my hearing aids. And I'm wearing clear glasses, red lipstick, a black shirt, and then I'm in a room full of plants and a glass patio door behind me and the outside back there.
So beautiful. I will say I am in a Pete's Coffee with a black t-shirt on, wearing yellow glasses with my brown spiky hair and grayed beard with my ear pods in. Very non-official microphone for a podcast, but I'm very excited to talk with you, ALISON, because I attribute the TUBA Thieves to being one of the inspirations to how and why we have tried to adjust the BraveMaker Film Festival and how we screen films. And so before I get there, I'll just say thank you for making this film, which is going to be screening in Redwood City on July 15th, 2023. So get your tickets to the TUBA Thieves today. We will make sure links are put here in the chat. But this film is a really amazing exploration. It's an art piece. It's a sound extravaganza, silence and captioning. I mean, all these amazing things that I feel like is the future of filmmaking. So I've done a ton of research. I've heard so many of your interviews. I was at Sundance this past year where you were debuted. So let's just jump right in. The TUBA Thieves. What in the world? How do you describe it? And it was an 11-year journey. So talk about the making of it.
Yeah, it's how do you describe it? Even now, at this point, 12 years in, describing it is still just this kind of, you have to experience it. I realize that it's not really a film that is spoilable, which is kind of wonderful. So I can just sort of tell people, what the story of the film is, and it really doesn't change your experience of watching it. And so what it is a film that has this title that's based on these tuba thefts that happened from 2011 to 2013. And basically, like, tubas were being stolen from high schools all around Southern California. And when I heard the story, the reason it sparked my interest was because I had just finished making a film with a cast and crew that was very evenly split between like half hard of hearing and deaf and half hearing. And so I had come out of this amazing, powerful experience where everybody's experience with hearing was so diverse. Like, I think sometimes there's this misconception that there's like blankness, deaf, you hear nothing, or hearing. And of course, everybody has, people in their lives that are late deafened who've lost their hearing. And so obviously that right there breaks it down. But there's actually just so many more experiences around sound if you're on the deaf spectrum. And so I think that's really fascinating and interesting. And I am, interested in getting past some of those misconceptions. So really, when I heard these stories about the tuba thefts, the way they were reported was so focused on the kind of like, the Hollywood drama of it, of like the thieves breaking into these schools and why. And all those questions are super fascinating to me too. But I kept feeling pulled to this story that just wasn't being talked about at all, which was, what are these? The question I had was, what are the students doing? Are they sitting in class listening? Are they bored out of their minds? Are they being sent to go, like the tuba players, are they being sent to the library to go do something else? Like, what happens in their education when something actually so violent, even though we think of it as like quite funny because it's this big, clunky oompa oompa instrument, and I think I just immediately became really interested in the real experience of these kids, and then also the band directors, and then how that impacts the high schools and the communities and who can replace them. And so that was kind of my entry point. But I never felt like I had to tell the story with this fidelity to that element. And so really, like, the Tuba Thieves became this place where I could explore what it means to make a film and the role of the soundtrack. Like, where does that part have to come in? It's always conventionally at the very end, the composer's responding to story and narrative and the edit and the finished film. And I was like, well, why not just start the film with the soundtracks and make a film backwards and sort of direct a film in a way that a composer responds to different, like, aspects of story. So I asked 3 composers to make me musical scores, and then I just, like, the film just became this long process of building based on listening, based on hearing, based on deafness. And so what you're seeing here is the main character, Nike Prince. And basically, like, when I started trying to figure out what was this film project going to be, I knew it was called The Tuba Thieves. She told me this story. She was in my first film, and she told me the story about how she had dated a really famous musician and went on tour with him, and his drummer would set up 2 drum kits, and she is deaf, and she watched him drum and matched his movements. And I was like, this is fascinating. Could we make a movie, and will you be the main character? And, like, that might be part of it. We'll figure it out. And that was sort of how the whole film built. I really called it this kind of like listening process. And in the end, after all the listening, you have this film that took years to make and pulled in many, many aspects of sound and hearing and noise pollution and, like, Los Angeles through its, like, auditory, aural soundscape. A hard film to describe. It always takes me like 10 minutes. So
it's really beautiful and inspiring. And so if you're listening to this podcast, or you're reading the transcript, which we will have and make available afterward, or you're watching live or on the replay, you really do have to experience it. And let me just kind of step back last year, so I've been only filmmaking for, about a decade myself, and it's been a long journey, but in my human experience, I feel as if I have been so ignorant to the marginalized communities around me, whether it is the deaf community or the LGBT community or women or people of color, and the challenge for representation. And so
Mhm.
as I'm becoming more and more experienced and educated, and I'm really, honestly hearing these stories in which, my silence or my ignorance has been problematic and or contributed to the exclusion of these communities, I'm trying to figure out how can I do better. So when it came to filmmaking, I had no idea what open captions were until I saw your film and started hearing you talk about it. But last year at the film festival for BraveMaker, we had an amazing film called Being Michelle. Atin, the director, you might know Atin, yeah, and May, the producer. We screened their film, and they educated me to how we can be more inclusive, to have ASL interpreters at our event. And so, to be quite honest, I was like kind of thrown for a loop with, okay, things I wasn't thinking about, like budgeting and space and having to light our
Mhm.
ASL
Right.
interpreters properly. It has been such a humbling experience. But the
Mhm.
most humbling thing that happened for me that I go will forever change me, and why I feel as if now I need to be an advocate, and thank you for your education, is when our deaf community came last year, they asked, do you have any more films that are open captioned? And out of 40, we had two,
Mhm.
and my heart just sank, and I realized this we can't do this. This has to change, so we made a mandate last year that our 5th anniversary would have all open caption. Now, you were at Sundance this past year. I think more and more film festivals are going to be doing it, but I still feel like there's a rub, there's sort of like pushing against it. And I've heard you speak on it, so I'm sure you're exhausted doing it, but one thing that I've heard you say that I thought really was really convicting was, you use the word rude, I think, at one point, about how when we don't include even things like more than we had this in our trailer, more than just a music note when it comes to
Mhm.
music. What kind of music? We had funky music for a second, but that should be the whole time. And so it is just mind boggling to me how much work we have to do to get there, to be really inclusive to all communities. So that was a lot of chatting, but this is your life,
Mhm.
and your lived experience, really. So please jump in with however you want to react to what I just shared. But it really is, it's a thank you for challenging us. And I think you're helping to pave the way for the future of what film festivals should look like.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that um, I think it's really fascinating, just culturally. Like we're in this moment where, yeah, everybody is being schooled, and some people are really resisting it, and some people are like humbled and like, okay, like what does it
Hmm.
mean to be on this journey? And I think it's just really interesting. So I went through this really strange period of maybe 5 years where I would tell people I'm deaf, hard of hearing, and it was like clockwork. The response would be, "What?" And it was a joke. Like it was this really pathetic joke where I was like, at first I was like, "No, I just said," and I would answer, and then they'd be like, "Ha ha ha," and I was like, "That's not funny," and like that the 400th time that happened, I was just like, oh my gosh. And then it just stopped. And I don't know why. It's really fascinating. Like people just stopped doing that. And at some point, there was some sort of awareness that I don't know, like that joke was kind of tasteless and not actually that funny. And it's this tricky thing of like, I don't ever want to shame people. Um, but sometimes things really are like offensive. And so I think there's this way where like um yeah, like for me, I like, for example, I'm going to a film to see a film tonight. A friend invited me who is deaf. She and another deaf actor are in the film, and I am really, really curious if I'm going to have to ask for a captive view, or if she's also going to be there at the Q&A. So this film should have open captions. And for anyone who doesn't know, closed captions are the CC, when you see that, that means you can turn them on or off. Open captions, you don't have the option. They are just there. They're burned into whatever you're watching. So my film has open captions. And I really, really believe that when you go into a movie theater, every theater should have open captions. It should just be automatic. And what's interesting is, you know, when we're at film festivals, almost all filmmakers now have to provide captions at a film festival. So the festival then is choosing whether or not to turn them on. Some festivals still aren't quite at the place of requesting them from everyone, but like most are. Secret is out. Like most are at this point, which is great. But they're not playing them with it. So it's really, it just, I don't know, it's just confusing. And so even like tonight, I'm actually going to a theater where the film is playing at like, you know, a major theater in LA. And I have actually kind of made a decision since Sundance to not ever use a captive view ever again. So I'm choosing between getting the film if it's not captioned, not getting the film if it's not captioned, or not going to theaters, which I'm trying so hard right now to like support the effort of people still going into theaters. And I just keep saying, you know, have open captions, you're going to get a big deaf audience at least. So if you're having a problem getting an audience in, at least deaf people are going to come.
Okay, there's so many feelings around this, because I'm still learning too, but on the side now, as a film fest director, let me speak to that. I know for some, it has felt like a little bit of a burden for some, right? They felt maybe like, oh, this is costing me extra money or extra time. And to some extent, I get it. The film is an expensive hobby. It really is. And to be asked or requested to add that, sure. But I think as filmmakers, we really have to be thinking about, do we want people to see and hear our film? And if we do, then we need to be doing these things. Now, I know, being totally transparent, I think we have a long way to go, even for our film festival this year. Like the captions, and I want to talk about this. The captions are just basic for many of them, subtitles, you know, like dialogue. But we need to learn as filmmakers that, and Stranger Things, I think, brought this into the conversation. I don't know if you remember this. When they had their open captions or their closed captions, they did a really amazing job. And some people were kind of commenting around like, wow, every single sound was like gushy or squishy or blah, blah, blah. And I remember the creators of Stranger Things saying, well, if you don't like these captions, you don't have to turn them on because they're maybe not for you, but they're for an audience who needs them. And I put this into the puzzle going like, wow, when we're thinking as filmmakers, do I want people to see my films? Well, the deaf community needs to understand that there's a car horn in the background that we don't see, that there is knocking at the door that maybe be one knock or 75 annoying knocks. And it's just opening my mind to the possibilities. So as I'm working with the editors I have 3 different short films in post-production now. I'm thinking about this now because of what I'm learning. So thank you. And I want all of our filmmakers of the BraveMaker Film Fest to use this as an archival inspiration about why it's necessary. Because I've heard you say in other interviews, if we're not willing, it's basically like saying we're excluding you. We don't want you to see our films. And that's not the message we want to put out, right?
Yeah, but I mean, also another way to think about it is like, I keep saying this thing of cinema is still really young. You know, it's only 150 years long, or 150 years old at this point. And if you think about like that time period where sound entered cinema, there were people that were like, now I have to figure out like where to put someone who's going to hold a boom mic or whatever, you know, like, how are we going to hide that person? Where are we going to put the microphone? We're going to jam it into this plant. And then the actor's like, but now I have to lean towards the plant, you know, like there's all these funny things that happened where people were getting used to it. And when you say that example of like, do I express that there's 75 really annoying knocks happening versus like knocking, which is the same equivalent as like a music symbol, or like, you know, frenetic music that suddenly drops out, or, you know, like you can think of ways to communicate. Like the music is totally telling you emotionally how to feel about the story. And so captions are an equivalent of that. No one would say they're not going to color correct their film. They just work that into the budget. And also there are tons of like resources out there. Like you can get very cheap, like transcripts made, and you can do this. It doesn't have to be like a absolutely ridiculously expensive endeavor. I think also like closed captions, I really think are like for streaming. That's where you can turn them on or off. And I think theaters, that's really where the open captions should live. It's like, it just makes sense.
So I want to talk a little bit specifically about the art of creating the captions, because I know you, as a filmmaker in general, collaborated on the TUBA Thieves. And I think that was kind of a really cool part of my research and learning about the making of the film that I think all of us filmmakers can learn from. As you just said, if we're already collaborating with sound designers and colorists and editors, there's another collaboration that can happen into captioning. So if you are watching or listening right now, if you see the TUBA Thieves, you will see the creative ways in which captions come onto the screen in all different places and in different ways. So talk about that, because I know you had many people that helped you, helped create them in kind of a communal way.
Yeah, I mean, what I really, really want to stress, because what I've been hearing a lot of people talk about is this term creative captioning. And I keep just being like, whoa, hold on, before everybody gets like, let's like think about this, because I don't think creative captioning, I am a little bit wary of that term, feeling like, oh my gosh, the floodgates, like feeling like overwhelming people. And I'll just say that, like, let's not get the cart before the horse. Like, let's just get good, solid, like reliable, trustworthy captions on films first. Like, they don't actually have to be some like, art master thing. So all of my captions are super practical. The colors are, I chose to have 4 different colors because I was trying to distinguish different sounds. So like the sounds you hear from anything in the film are blue. Anything that's spoken language is pink. Anything that's signed language is white. And then there's this kind of other voice of the film that's sort of maybe a narrator or something, and that's yellow. And literally, it's a practical decision. It has a really lovely visual aspect. It adds this like whole visual layer to the film, but it starts from just like problem solving. Like the captions being located in different parts of the screen, again, problem solving, like putting it sort of close to show sources of sound. Like if a leaf blower is blowing in the neighbors, like when you're doing sound design, you'll move it over to the right channel or whatever. And so similarly, like the captions are up in the right to kind of like make it feel like that source of sound is like over there. And you can do spatial things with sound or with subtitles. Like that's where I think it's like, yeah, that's creative, but it's totally problem solving. It's totally practical. It's totally a form of communication. And so I want to like kind of rein it in when people start using the term creative captions, because I'm like, yeah, it's creative, but it's also like explaining something visually, and it's sign language, whether it's like signed with your hands or whether it's like signs visually that are showing you something that's happening. And then sometimes I just, try to be like very succinct and have a caption, take up the same amount of time that the sound takes as it's playing, And so again, it's like practical, but it's like it's a artistic choice, I guess, and like match the sound. Or sometimes I had the sound match the captions. It wasn't like the captions were always a response. So that I think is like a very big difference in the TUBA Thieves, because I'm really concerned with sound and with hearing and with deafness. There was not a hierarchy of sound comes first and then captions come. Like they were bouncing kind of back and forth. And I think that's a very particular thing to this film in particular. Yeah.
So don't use the word creative, but I hope you're okay with artistic, because it really is. It's something. It is an experience, and yeah. I hear what you're saying. I feel like a lot of us filmmakers are, a lot of the filmmakers to the BraveMaker Film Festival, we're just going, like some even said, can I opt out of this? And I had to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't opt out of this. It is a requirement, but it's like the bare necessities, just get it on there. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think as we grow, we have something to learn from how you did it. So thank you. And just even the color coding is like, yes, of course, this is so cool. And thinking about where it goes. And I heard somebody else in another film talk about, which is an editing kind of craft piece, but if your cut ends where, and if the subject or character is done talking, you need to be aware of, does the captioning end in the same places, and it just changes the edit a little bit. So I think there's a lot to learn here, which is really exciting. Also want to hear about this, because something new that came to me was, as we were getting ready for our film festival, one of your representatives said, hey, we got like the one sheet of things we need to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so cool to hear about the balloons. I was like, okay, this is amazing. So from how I understand it, you can add, all of our screenings will have a bucket or basket of balloons available for the deaf community. Talk about what the deaf community and what anybody could do if they wanted to experience another way to experience sound and music in the film. Talk about that element, if you would.
Yeah, the first film that I made, I always showed it with balloons for the audience whenever it was in a theater. And the reason was because balloons are just like that thin latex. When you blow it up, you're basically, also it's just so beautiful that you're sitting there holding your breath. But it's such a sensitive, thin layer that physical sound waves travel through the balloon. And so you can feel the soundtrack in a way that, like, maybe your ears, especially I think for hearing people, their ears are not processing like, what sound waves do. Deaf people are like very, very sensitive to sound moving through the chair or in the floor or whatnot. And so I think just like the reason I had them there is really for the deaf audience, but the hearing audience also, I think, is getting a lot out of it. And it comes from this very simple tradition in deaf clubs around the country, where people would gather and they would watch a movie, and they would just have balloons so that they could feel the soundtrack. So, you turn on the speakers and it's like there physically, and it's really sensitive. Like you can feel different things in the tips of your fingers versus I don't know, these like thicker pads or whatever. Like it's really fascinating how detailed it gets. And so one of the things, we've been providing balloons for almost every screening while we've been on the festival circuit. And I try to be very clear that this is not like some solution, like everybody, you need to have balloons from here on out. It's really just like a throwback to the simplicity and ingenuity of like anyone who has a disability and has to constantly problem solve, because we live in a culture where the built environment is not for us. So, but yet everybody benefits once our solutions are like put forward. Like you think of a curb cut, and every single parent who's pushing like a baby in a stroller is like probably somewhere in their being thanking like they don't know to do this, but thanking the disabled community historically for like advocating for those kinds of changes. Like anybody in a metro who gets into like an elevator that takes you down to another level because you have your big heavy suitcase and you're going to the airport, you're benefiting from people in wheelchairs. I think there's like all of these things, like captions are absolutely one of these like benefits for everyone. And like I teach Gen Z, all of them are turning on captions, and it's like I have students who their first language is not English. Anyone who has like ADHD, or like people who are dyslexic, like it's just really helpful for many, many people. And so yeah, the balloons kind of just came out of this, like it's a fun way for me to just like highlight a little deaf history. And get people kind of like talking and knowledgeable about this really little thing that has been done in the past, but actually is just like beautiful and sweet. So, and also like people love holding them. And then the other thing I love about the balloons is it kind of makes the experience a little bit less precious about like quietness in a theater. So it's really like after this pandemic experience, like, you know, balloons, if you squeeze it, it makes little like squeaky farty sounds. And so it's like, you know, it's just, it takes away that kind of preciousness of the like cathedral theater space, and you're really there with other people. And especially if it's a theater full of like hearing and deaf people, the deaf people are like much more physical with the balloons, and like I think that can make hearing people sometimes just be like, ugh, and then they're like, wait, this really makes sense in this movie. So it has these kind of like funny layers that I've really enjoyed experiencing.
Which is life, right? The nuance of life and the layers of life, you know, adding in all these cool different experiences and reminders of our humanity is really great, which I think that's what film is meant to do. And as you said, it's continuing to shape and evolve and teach us how we experience the world. And, you know, BraveMaker is about trying to conquer fears, trying to pave, we often say braved the way into the future. And we're learning. I think one of the things I'm just grateful for is that film, and really the makers of film, are teaching us how to grow, how to move in the future. So yeah, thank you for making this film, and, you know, 11 long years of your life. Like, wow. All the performers in it, just huge kudos to you and to your team. And I guess I'll end too with just some thoughts on filmmaking. I would love to hear you share how, you know, we're talking a lot about being intentional, what we put in front of the camera, but I also love the challenge to be intentional behind the camera. How can we empower people, give people opportunities, and learn from, like, you know, Coda opened the door last year at the Oscars and at Sundance as a reminder, like, there's a place, and the deaf community needs to have roles and deserves it. So make a space for the deaf community. It's possible. You can have deaf people on your set, you know. So I want to grow in this way. So any thoughts you have for our filmmaking community about doing better in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with so many people on this film, not just like the deaf community, but also a lot of students and band directors and like community around the schools where the tubas had been stolen. And I was really conscious and very, very open from the very beginning of working with these like young, you know, Giovanni, for example, the other main character in the film, he was 15 the first time that we filmed with him, and then he was 21 the last time we filmed with him. So I've worked with him over like a long period of time. He and his partner Asia, who's also in the film, are actually, that's Giovanni right there. They are actually, I think, in labor right now, having their first baby, which is so wonderful. And you know, even as I say that, like, there was this beautiful thing that happened at Sundance where these communities within the film came together and met each other for the first time, like some of the deaf actors, and then some of the hearing actors from the schools that had had their tuba stolen, and the band director. Like, we were all at Sundance together, and they just kept talking about what a family they felt like. And, you know, I think like I am really proud of that, and I will give myself some credit around this, because I try to constantly think and wrestle with and analyze and acknowledge and deal with and face like the power you have in the position of filmmaking and as a director. And, you know, if we go, especially in the history of documentary, if we go into any sort of community that we don't live in, there are power dynamics. And how do you be open and honest with the people that you are working with? And for me, it's been like, I have close relationships with Nike and with Giovanni and Asia, the three main characters of the film. Well, Giovanni and Nike, really, they're like dear to me now. And those were relationships that were built and were based on me talking very openly to them about, like, you know, I am a white woman. I can hear. I did not go to this high school. I am not a musician. I don't even know what it's like to be in band. Like, I did not grow up in like the community you grew up in. So like, what would it mean for us to talk about like how your story gets told through this? What is it? For me, I'm really, really over on this side thinking about what it means to listen. Everything is like moving forward with listening. And I do think of listening as this like deeply, deeply respectful endeavor. And so, you know, maybe this is like a little rambly way of just saying like, I really think if you're going to be a filmmaker on any level, you represent someone, that is a relationship that is, it requires like such reverence, such respect, such constant investigation. Social justice, I think, should be like deeply embedded into that relationship, like an awareness of selfishness and self-servingness when it's your film and you're driving it forward and it requires so much. Like, none of that is small and none of that is easy. And I think like I just call on responsibility as a filmmaker.
Yes to everything.
Yeah.
That's a great way for us to close before we do our Brave Faves. I just read an article, and I'm so tired of them, as I'm sure everyone is, of toxic sets, you know, of showrunners or you know, filmmakers, whoever, using their power and their authority to take advantage, to overwork their cast or their crew. It just feels so discouraging. This is, you know, for me, this is my passion, but it's also my career. It is my art and my hobby, but it's also like what fills my soul. And I think of people forgetting that and it becoming a place of greed. Hence, we're seeing all these strikes where, you know, people in power are abusing the people who are creating the ideas and not compensating them. It feels so unfortunate because there's so much good that is done in this art form. So yes, I thank you for that. We need to be more responsible. And, you know, let me just say to emerging actors and writers and filmmakers, you know, you don't need to put up with this kind of behavior. It should not be common. All too often I've had people tell me, you know, it just comes with the territory, or I got to get used to it. And I go, you don't speak up if you can. And I guess I know I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I know that can also often be hard when it's a paycheck and you do need to make rent and put food on the table. So let's brave our way to the future and make our sets more inclusive and safer and braver for all people. And that could be a whole other conversation of how we do that, with making sure it is diverse from the camera and behind. And we have intimacy coordinators and therapists on set if your film has sensitive or triggering scenes. So much to do, so much to learn. Thank you so much. The TUBA Thieves screens on July 15th at 2:30 p.m. in Redwood City, California, at the Cinemark 20 Theater in Redwood City, California, with the BraveMaker Film Fest. So come and see this film, directed by ALISON O'Daniel, over the course of 11 years. Sundance selected and really touring all over the world now in screenings, which is really good. So kudos to you. Very, 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 very exciting. Will you hang on for a few more minutes and give me your favorite thing of the week?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Brave Faves. TV shows, films, books, songs, technology, clothing, podcast, food, and more. These are a few of our favorite people, places, and things. Brave Faves.
Okay, my favorite thing of this week is The Bear Season 2. It is on Hulu. I watched Season 1, I think last summer is when I watched it, and I absolutely love it. If you get a chance, if you want to see, in my mind, some great acting, some great writing and directing, take a look at this show. It really is doing something special, and it's near and dear to my heart. Those of you who know and to listen to 197 episodes with me, it starts off with grief and dealing with the loss of a loved one to suicide, which is something that my work explores as well. So take a look at it on Hulu. Season 2 is all up right now, and there's some really amazing guest stars this season. Take a look. All right, what do you got, Allison? What's your favorite thing of the week?
I am reading this book called True Biz, and it's by the author Sarah Novick. And it's amazing. And this is very thematically aligned because Sarah is a deaf writer, a deaf activist, a deaf champion for the diversity of the deaf community, which I think is so important. It's something that I kind of feel like I have this mission to get all these hard of hearing people out of the closet and just be like little d / capital D deaf, like just own it and not be so separated from deaf culture. And Sarah has written a lot of amazing articles that get published in different news things about deaf politics. And she's written 2 novels, and this is her most recent novel. And it's about basically a school and all these like diverse experiences in a deaf school. And from, like somebody who was raised, a young girl or a teenage girl who was raised in a hearing family and doesn't know sign language, but is totally deaf and had language deprivation, to, other people that were like completely raised entirely in deaf culture. And I think that she's doing an amazing job of, like educating hearing people on the diversity while writing for her community and her love of deaf culture. And so True Biz by Sarah Novick. She's amazing.
Great. Awesome. Well, you heard it here. Allison O'Daniel, thank you so much for being with us. Don't go away. To everybody else, thank you so much for listening, watching, reading episode 197 of the BraveMaker podcast. I'll tell you, I absolutely love getting to do this work, and it's only because you all sponsor and partner and show up. I can't do it without our live show producer, Amy Cohen, out of Austin, Texas, our intern, Jessica Cohen from Austin, who will take this video and cut it up into cool little snippets and put it on Instagram. And then, of course, Barnell Amos, who takes the audio version and puts it on our podcast, as well as Carrie Alley from Grand Rapids, Michigan, who does all our social media for the show. Thank you. If you want to join the 30 people, that's it, 30 people every month, give everywhere from $3 to $100. If you want to join that group, you can text the word BraveMaker to 44321, or you can go to bravemaker.com/donate. And your contributions help us do the film festival every year. 5 years in a row, we've been in Redwood City. We have over 40 some films. We have like 15 different workshops. You get to meet filmmakers, talk about acting, screenwriting, all sorts of free things for students. We love makers. We love you. I hope you'll come July 13th through the 16th in Redwood City, California. And if you know the deaf community, if you're part of the deaf community, come out. We are making spaces for you. We want to learn from you. We want this to be an inclusive place for everyone. All of our venues are ADA accessible. Allison, one last time, where can people find you and follow your work?
On Instagram, you can find anything about the film at the TUBA THIEVES. And then we also have a website, www.thetubathieves.com, that has information about our upcoming screenings. I have a website, www.alisonodaniel.com. Allison has 1 L. And my personal Instagram is @samboni.duet.
Allison can be found, so go find Allison. And let me say, as I try to do often, this is a business about relationships. Support one another. You never know when you might intersect and be in each other's ethos and working on a project together. Sometimes it can start with social media when we use it positively. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Allison O'Daniel. Really excited. Again, 2.5-ish weeks from now, the TUBA Thieves in Redwood City, California. Get your tickets at the BraveMaker at bravemaker.com/filmfest. Okay, this has been great. Hope to connect with you in person sometime, and wish you all the best in all of your future endeavors. And can't wait to see what next film comes out. Hope it doesn't take 11 years.
No, never again.
All right, everybody. Brave stories change the world, and you are the story. Be brave.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at BraveMaker.org. Like, subscribe, and share. To become a monthly donor, text the word BraveMaker to 44321 or go to bravemaker.com/donate. Thanks for tuning in.